Welcome to Haz'el Inspirations. I'm Leah, your host. We are back with Mr. Ford. We are on our continuation of our legal issues. Today, we will be discussing filing grievances. To my understanding, the grievance process is a formal complaint filed by inmates regarding their treatment, conditions of confinement, or any misconduct by prison officials. I think this is a way to address issues internally before pursuing external legal actions. And Mr. Ford, he's going to clarify that for me. Now, from my understanding with the grievance process, inmates usually start by filing a grievance within the prison system internally. And if it's not resolved, that's when it can escalate to a higher authorities and they can seek external intervention. Mr. Ford, I want you to kind of highlight briefly about that process and how that extends from, I guess, after the sentence is opposed and how the process is started and what challenges may inmates face when filing for them. And good evening. Thank you for joining us.
Good evening. Yeah, when you're talking about grievances, that doesn't really have too much to do with the criminal process as far as you being convicted. It usually has something to do with things that are going on inside of the prison. So it usually deals with situations like conditions of confinement, or medical issues, food issues, heating, retaliation, officers. It deals with everything that's occurring inside of the prison. Now, if it's something that it's dealing with, you can't get access to the courts or because you can't use the law library or something, but it deals with everything that the DOC has control over. So it is not to talk to the judge, it's to talk to the people who are running the prison. And what you're doing in Virginia, what they have is called the 866.1 grievance procedure, but this is pretty much the same grievance procedure throughout DOC, wherever they are. But what you do is you're filing an informal complaint and you're trying to deal with it informally. So sometimes just talking to the people and saying, look, this is what's going on, and I need this to change, or I need some kind of resolution. And they're supposed to respond to that. And they have a certain amount of days. They usually have 15 days to respond to the informal complaint form. So when they respond to the informal complaint form, it's supposed to go to the head of whatever department that is. So if you have a complaint, say, against the law library or a complaint against an officer in the building, it's supposed to go to the shift commander, or it's supposed to go to the law library coordinator, or the sometimes they have an institutional program manager or operations manager, or could go to the warden. So what you're doing is you're stating, look, this is what's going on. I'm not getting access to this, or something's happening with me, and I need you to resolve it according to the policy.
Okay.
And what they're supposed to do is they're supposed to answer that.
Not to cut you off, I understand about the mistreatment by staff. I understand that grievance process. But what about the issues with medical care or unsanitary living conditions? How do you file a grievance about that, and where is that directed to?
Well, if you have like a immediate issue, you could file an immediate emergency grievance. Like if you have a medical issue, there's certain things you don't have to file a grievance for. You just have to let them. Like if you have heart problem, tightness in your chest, things like that, so anaphylactic situation, then you bring that straight to whoever's there. Now, sometimes they still might make you write a grievance, emergency grievance. So there's certain things that fall under the emergency grievance category, and that stuff, whenever it deals with medical, it has to be sent straight to medical. So Most places, like, they'll call it in over the radio, or officer will come and bring the complaint over there, and then medical is supposed to come straight to your building. But if it's a regular complaint, an informal complaint form that you just put in the box, then it has to it's routed to medical, and they're really supposed to be the only people that respond to anything that deals with medical issues. Only the medical department is supposed to respond to it. Now, throughout the years, that's not the case necessarily, but
Oh, okay, I'm going to interject again. What's the turnaround time if it's medical? Because health and wellness is supposed to be a high priority with any institution, the welfare of anybody. And I thought that's why we do those intake evaluations to ensure that the medical aspect is being addressed.
Well, I'm telling you, like, just according to how it's supposed to go, according to the rules, it's supposed to go, like, if you put it in the mailbox, they have 15 days to respond to an informal complaint. Then you have 30 days, the whole time period, you have 30 days from the day of the incident to file a regular grievance, which will go to the warden or to the head of the health service department. So if it's dealing with medical, it's going to go to the health services supervisor, who is, or they call it a health service administrator at the compound. Now, if it has to go past that, it goes to the health services director for the Virginia Department of Corrections. But now when you're talking about specifics, like if you're saying, now I've been in all kinds of situations in the system where it doesn't matter what you do, like, you're pretty much gonna have to fight to get to medical. So
I mean, if I come in and I'm a diabetic and I have been taking insulin for 10 years and all of a sudden I'm winding up in a system, you can't stop me from taking my insulin. That's medically necessary.
yeah, there's what's supposed to happen, and then there's what actually happens. So first I was explaining what is supposed to happen. What is supposed to happen is they basically have like a triage system where, say, with a medical issue, you file something, or you contact medical, or they contact medical, and then they basically are supposed to triage you like going to a hospital. Okay, these are serious, these are less serious, these we can deal with later on. What the reality is, I mean, now I'm setting aside what's supposed to happen with what actually probably goes on, or not probably, but goes on. A lot of times you have people who are working in medical who are minimally trained, understaffed, under-equipped. The officers that you are dealing with, either understaffed, undertrained, unequipped, don't understand, or some do understand. So, I can't paint the whole thing with the broad brush, but I've been in all types of situations. Now, what's supposed to happen is, if the staff sees you, and they're supposed to have, training to understand, different medical problems, and to be able to bring that to the medical people's attention. But you're not having direct contact a lot of times with medical. So you're going through another person. There's a go-between, and sometimes it's the officer, or sometimes it's because you're in a cell. So now, like, if you take two different situations, if you take the dorm setting and you take the pod setting where you're in cells, it's much harder to get to medical from the cell situation on higher levels than it is from the dorm situation, because you can pretty much get out of the building a little bit easier, and you have a little bit more way to make noise if you're not getting, like, several times people have had a heart attack or have seizure right there on the floor, and it's like, if it wasn't for the fact that we were in the dorm and we could bang on the window or do something crazy to get the people's attention to send the people from medical to the unit, then the person would just die. And that's happened several times. But it's easier to access, get somebody's attention when you're in the dorm as opposed to when you're in the cell. Because if you're in the cell, you could die in the cell, nobody would know you're in there. Because if you're in there by yourself, that's happened tons of times. Like, people are dead in the cell, dead on the toilet, dead in the bed, been dead for a while, dead on the yard. So if you get medical's attention, then it's about how fast medical will respond. So that's its own set of circumstances. So it's not like calling 911 on the street where, you know,
Right.
911 comes, lights and sirens, and they come over there. They got to walk from wherever they're from to the building. So, you know, you would hope that it goes right, but
So from what I'm hearing, what you're stating right now is that there is room for improvement in the system. I think that maybe there's probably an investment, whereas though we should invest more in providing training to our COs, the staff, in case these are emergencies. Or
well,
how would you perceive the grievance process? Do you think it needs to change?
well, the grievance process always has to be improved because a lot of times they obstruct the grievance process so much that it is no process. So it's, you know, there is, like I'm explaining, there is what is supposed to exist. So in the policy, it's supposed to run how I'm stating it. And what actually happens is almost nothing like that. So you go through these processes, like you have a grievance coordinator who is it's like the grievance coordinator sometimes, like at some prisons, the grievance coordinator might be the grievance coordinator, the institutional ombudsman. Ombudsman is person is supposed to help you and be on your side, an advocate. And then they can also be the law library coordinator. There could be three positions in one. So if you have all of those delegated to one person, they can totally obstruct you, like not just obstruct your grievance and send it back to you constantly, not file it. You know, they have all these reasons they could check off for saying that we're not going to accept your grievance. And you almost have to be a lawyer to know how to file a grievance in the system, because depending on what compound you're on, they can totally obstruct you. So, I mean, they can use a host of reasons. So you have these specific set amount of times for you to file something, or you have to attach something, or they want you to allege something in the grievance. But you're in DOC, normally you're dealing with people with very moderate to low so-called education as far as understanding corporate procedure. And they're holding you to almost the highest standard, higher than the court would hold you to, just to file a grievance. So ideally, your grievance is supposed to be sent to the correct department. What actually happens a lot of times is your grievance is either sent back to you for some host of reasons, and sometimes it's done just to obstruct the time. So by the time you get finished, your grievance time to file it is over. And then once that's over, they're basically, sometimes what they do is they do that so that they can insulate themselves from civil action. Because before you could file, say, a civil action complaint in the court, you have to go through the grievance process. So if you had a medical issue and or any kind of issue, you have to go through all the levels of review for the grievance process, no different than what we were talking about the other day with the habeas corpus. Like, you have to go through all these levels of review first. You have to exhaust it before you can go to the next stage. So that's the same thing with the grievance process. Like, if you don't file an informal complaint, or you don't successfully go through that within the 15 days, you can't file the grievance.
Okay,
And if you can't get through the grievance process,
I need to ask you
so
a
that way,
question on that. We're in the era of technology. So I know a lot of industries like to do away with paper. And this is just a hypothetical question. So in the DOC system, do you foresee in the near future that the paperwork that has to be submitted in, especially internally, if you have a kiosk machine accessible to everyone, not your tablets, a kiosk machine, whereas though those forms are on that machine and then can be transferred to the necessary personnel more efficiently and expeditiously so that it can save time, it can save somebody's life. Do you foresee maybe an electronic version of that being done?
I mean, they have the capacity to do it already. And some places, like in the jails, they have those things set up. In the Department of Corrections, like Virginia Department of Corrections, it's not set up. So I don't know, pretty much purposely, because if you know the jail has it set up, then why wouldn't you have it set up in the DOC? But if you have it on the kiosk, that's fine if your kiosk is working and if you're in a dorm. But if you're in a pod unit, like a cell block, and you have cells, doesn't matter if it's on the kiosk if you're locked in the cell. So the kiosk is outside in the pod. So that wouldn't benefit anybody. So you have to have basically both working systems. So if you can get on the kiosk and you can hit 911 and call to medical directly, and they could answer your call, then that would be good, because you would be able to bypass the officers. But everyone in this system is supposed to be trained to recognize things. But it's no different than what goes on the street with, police failing to recognize that this person is having a problem, and they're abusing them or beating them up. And it's like, don't you know this guy's paralyzed? Like, what's wrong? What don't you recognize? So when you have that, that's just a constant when you're dealing with people. That's why they have a claim called deliberate indifference, because deliberate indifference means that you are being deliberately indifferent. Like the first part of it is, did you recognize, or was there a serious medical need? Was there a serious need that you should have known, whether it was medical or whether it was conditions? Like, it could be the heat. It could be, it's been so hot in prisons where people die in the cell. People die right on the rec yard. There's no air conditioning. So would a normal person recognize that that's a serious need? And then the other thing is, when you saw that, when a serious need, medical need, or whatever other need existed, what did you do? Were you indifferent to it? Did you just not do anything? Did you not do enough? So that happens all the time, even with the COs or with the medical staff. I mean, you could put, or with the doctors, because you have medical staff, which is the nurses, and then you have the doctors, which basically they are the ones that actually prescribe or approve further treatment. So there's various levels to, say, when we're talking about medical issues, there's various levels of review. So if you go in, like I said, you deal with the nurse and they're triaging you, and then they set your appointment for the doctor. It's supposed to, according to policy, you're supposed to be seen by the doctor within 72 hours. And you should be seen, like I said, if you have a serious issue, they should be seeing you right then and there. But sometimes trying to get that communicated to the people, you pretty much might have to fight. You know what I'm saying? You might have to come across, you might have to fight. So, there's various levels of this, and it's different in different prisons. Some prisons they might be the best, and some prisons they are the worst. And then sometimes it's just based on the type of staff that they have there to deal with this type of stuff. But because there's cases where you might get to go to medical and the doctor is just not giving you the right treatment. So whether the right treatment was the medication or the right treatment was for you to go out to be seen by a specialist, because you have to go through that review process also. So you're not on the street. Everything has to be referred. So if you go sign up for medical, that issue has to be referred to the doctor by the nurse. Then if that issue is supposed to be seen by a specialist, like you have a back problem or eye problem or, a bone problem or something, a lung problem, a heart problem, then you have to go through the processes for that to be seen by those specialists, by the cardiologist, by the chiropractor, by the,
I'm just thinking about in the long run, how to efficiently give everyone, it shouldn't matter that you are in the system, no matter what you are in there for, you should be everybody should be treated equal. And health care should be, a priority to everyone. So I hope that in the near future that it gets better and they look at this. I hope that, our voices carry and people identify that there is a lack of that service within the system, and they look at ways of doing it. And I hope that, while you are advocating for, others and helping bring situations to, clarity, that, that people listen and that people will say, okay, yeah, it's time for change. It's time to, focus on certain areas and get an improvement. I'm not saying that, I mean, it's the same thing with unsanitary living conditions. I mean, certain things, are, are uncontrollable, but those things that you can control, we need to make it better, right?
Yeah, without a doubt. And then there's, how you actually do that. Some of it is common sense. A lot of stuff is common sense. But see, one thing with DOC, it happens behind the trees or behind roads that people don't really see. And your ability to communicate that stuff to people on the outside is very limited. So even these civil rights groups like the ACLU and the NAACP and stuff like that, they're not that accessible from inside. And they don't, in my opinion, they don't do too much to make themselves accessible. Um, so in a lot of these prisoner advocacy groups, sometimes it seems almost like they don't really understand the prison at all. But they have nonprofits and things like that set up, and they're supposed to be advocating for you, but they're the hardest people to reach. So if you're not in the prison and involved in that, see, all of this stuff is important because if you're trying to say that the point is to correct or rehabilitate, so if you get put into the situation where you're living within the government, because living inside the prison is like living inside of the government. You're all day you have contact with the government, some kind of entity. But if you are in there and you cannot get treatment or have your issues resolved in the way that you're telling me, okay, so you're telling me when I'm on the street, instead of putting a gun in your face, to go ahead and file the paperwork and we'll deal with these situations like that, like trusting the system. And then when you go and try to use the system, it doesn't work at all. And it's like, okay, well, then I'm going back to what I was doing before because that had way more effect. So if what you were trying to do was show me how to use and utilize this governmental apparatus, it should not be, you shouldn't have people in there to obstruct the process, because what you're doing is you're telling me right here, forget that. So yeah, it has to be, if what you're trying to do is rehabilitate, if that's what your goal is, or to try to teach people to use the system instead of go around the system or get it your own way. Like if you want me to get it my own way, I can get it my own way, but now we might have a problem. But if you want me to utilize the system, then you need to make sure that it's working in the way that it's designed to work. If you say this is the policy, then it should work in the way that the policy states. But you have the balance between what's written on paper and people. So people are people. You know what I'm saying? And if you put the people who work in the Department of Corrections, I'm not going to paint them all with a broad brush. I'm not going to get caught into doing that. But um, if you have people, just like you can have police or anybody who's, you got good ones, and then you got the ones who's like, how did you become a police officer? Like, how did that happen? And you have management and supervisors who are like, they're nowhere. So if you have that exists, and you have people who are deliberately indifferent, or they are obstructionists and they are only seeking power, it doesn't matter what the policy says, problems can exist that you cannot correct. And then it just prolongs whatever the situation was. Doesn't matter what it is. So yeah, people have to be involved in that, not just the people on the outside, not just the staff either, but the prisoners who are locked up. So that's what I did while I was in the prison. I didn't just, I use the systems, but I use all types of systems. So yeah, we have the physical system, but we also have the legal system, and all of it works together. Because if you're not going to resolve it like this, then we will resolve it like this. Now, which way do we resolve it? So, um, you know, it's there to be used. However, if a person can't use their common sense and say, well, this guy right here, he has a broken arm, but you want him to fill out a request form or informal complaint, and then the nurse that doesn't care or is out to lunch or whatever, and they're not going to respond to it, or they're back there in medical doing something totally different, like it has nothing to do with what's going on in the prison. So, you have all of these dynamics. It's a place that does not really have direct supervision of the public because it's behind the gates. And when it's behind the gates, anybody can do anything. And if you can't get your paperwork through so that other people can understand, hey, this is what's going on, and you don't get the rhetorical ethic response, like the rhetorical ethic is basically, it's just in what I say. I can tell you, they always have that generic response. I don't care what corporation it is. It's, the Department of Corrections is almost like any other corporation, but it can operate in secret. And people on the outside can, have no idea what's going on to the loved ones that's on the inside. And people that are, coming up to the front can always say that, yeah, we're doing this right, we're doing that right, we're doing this right, we're doing that right. But what's actually going on? So if the public is not going to push to break those walls down, and so they can make sure that their loved one is receiving proper care and treatment and having access to everything that he's supposed to have access to, and the prisoner inside doesn't overcome his ignorance of the system and how to utilize it, then where do we go? So yeah, a lot needs to happen. Now, sometimes I'm not going to say it's all the way bad, it's all the way good, because sometimes you can resolve a lot through the grievance process if you know how to push it.
Right.
But that's what goes hand in hand, that you need functioning law libraries, you need people there that are seasoned, that understand it. Because if you don't, like, you have situations where you can move all the guys that know out from where the other people are, and they have no access to the people that know. And then it's like, well, how do they get help? If you have me over here and they're over there, then how do those guys get help? So, it's just part of the system. But
Okay, well, we need to improve
yeah,
on this system because apparently, it's not just happening in the state of Virginia, it's happening all over. So we need to look at that part of the system. So
yeah, and on top of that, inside of there, I learned a lot about what's going on out here. So because it's a microcosm of the macrocosm, so you're really studying. You really get to see the government at work every day, and how they respond to situations, and then you start seeing that it's actually made up of people. So I wrote a report one time that dealt with, is this a system thing or is it a people thing? You know what I'm saying? We always say the system, but sometimes you just got people in there that are just doing what they want to do because they know they have the ability to do it. But, it's hand in hand. It's not all one way and it's not all the other way. It's a hand in hand situation. Everybody has to take part. And I know when I was in, I have to fight every day for sometimes even the smallest thing. But I always encourage the other people, and I've been encouraged, and we join up as a unit or whatever. Sometimes, man, you got to make noise. So either we're going to go through this and everybody's going to write a complaint, or I'm going to push mine and put it in the courts, because that's what you're trying to do. What you got to do is push your issue so you can get it reviewed through the process if you're going to have it put in the courts. Now, if you're obstructed, you could still file the complaint in the court. So what you're doing is you have different actions, and everything with the grievance procedure is for that. So basically what you're doing is the paperwork is important because that's how you're proving what happened. So you make sure that you sufficiently allege your complaint. And that takes, they should have a class basically when people come into the prison on, look, no one's going to have a class like that. But, they should have a class stating like, look, we're going to teach you how to write the grievances. We're going to teach you how to file the complaints, write the grievances, and push it to what they call the level 2 review, so that your issue can be heard by the court if necessary. So, because most people they don't comprehend that. If you're dealing with people who can't, a lot of people can't really read and write, or they don't have that many skills. They're not corporately trained, and you got people who are trained every day to utilize a grievance procedure or obstruct the grievance procedure or to do whatever they're supposed to do. Like several grievance coordinators have told me straight up, like, yeah, my job is, I'm being told to block the grievances. And the reason why they do that is if you can't get your grievance through the reviews, then the court can't hear it, basically. The court won't hear it. They can use that as an excuse not to hear it. So there's no one part, like everybody's in on the whole thing. So, there's the DOC, then there's their supervisors, which are in, say, Richmond, or they have regional offices, they have regional directors, and then they have the home office, which is 6900 Atmore Drive, say, in Virginia. And then you're trying to get your issue heard by the director. But if you're obstructed through that process and then you try to get to the court and the court says, well, you didn't go through this process, then you're obstructed. Then how do you deal with your issue? Or if you don't get relief in the court. So that's why there's a gap that has to be closed between like the prisoner advocacy groups, like ACLU or whatever, any other group, and the people that are in the prison that need the assistance. Because if you don't have a way, and sometimes it gets worse and worse because you have retaliation. Like if I write somebody up or write something up, they could retaliate against me all day long. And really that's according to the policy, you're not supposed to retaliate, but retaliation happens all day long. So, there's just, and I can't say it's all bad.
I can.
It's all good.
Thank you. I think we're going to we've covered a lot this in this segment, and I know there's much more that we have to cover, but we're running a little bit out of time. So I just want to thank everyone for joining us in this important episode of legal issues and the legal resources. And if you found that this episode was informative, we ask that you subscribe. We ask that you share with family and loved ones. And we ask that you leave us a review. We would really like to find out what other information that Mr. Ford can share with you. It doesn't just extend from the Virginia aspect, it extends from wherever state you may be residing at the time. Until next time, we ask that you stay informed and that you stay empowered. Everyone have a good night.